So next we're going to move into multiplying and dividing. We're going to start with multiplying first. So multiplying, very similar again, just like if you had an x or a y that you're dealing with, except now we're dealing with an I. And there may be one or two additional steps, but first we're going to start with when we're just multiplying. So first we have an imaginary part, and we've got our imaginary part, and we have our non-imaginary part. And that's okay when we're multiplying and dividing. All right, we can combine those two things, unlike adding and subtracting. So when we multiply here, we're going to go large numbers. So 5 times 7 gets us 35. And just like if it was an x, we bring along our I. Sometimes you'll see this written as 5i times 7, same thing, right? So whether it's a dot like we have up here or parentheses down here, you're still multiplying. Okay, so let's step it up a notch. We have now that we are combining two imaginary numbers by multiplication. So again, we take our large numbers and we say 6 times 3 gets you to 18. Now we've got I times I. So just like if it was x times x, it gets us to a second power. So in this case, we get an I squared. Okay, so you should never, we get a good job getting to this point, but then we should never leave it like this. If we recall from 2 videos ago, we know what I squared is, right? So we want to recall I squared equals -1. So all this says is 18 times -1, which I'm sure you've been doing for quite a while now. 18 times -1 gets us -18. So anytime you see that I squared, we want to substitute in this -1. Moving on to our last kind of multiplication, we have when we have two binomials or two pieces in parentheses. So we see our two pieces in parentheses, and hopefully, again, this should look pretty similar or familiar. We dealt with this before all this break happened. I know it's been a while, but the word FOIL might come to mind or might help you recall how to do these. So again, FOIL, we're combining our first by multiplication, combining our outsides by multiplication, combining our insides by multiplication, and combining our lasts by multiplication. So if we go through here and follow just our normal FOIL process, we get 3 times 4 gets you 12. 3 times -5i gets you -15i. 2i times 4i gets you +8i. And lastly, we got 2i times -5i, which gets us -10. Think about what your variable should be. I times I gets you I squared. So now we have done all of our multiplication. We just want to simplify as much as possible. 12 is our only term with no i's, so let's leave there. Then we have two things with i's, so we've got -15i plus 8i. What does that take us to? -7i. And lastly, we're left with this 10i squared. Hopefully you recall from our last example that I said whenever you have an I squared, you should replace it with a -1, right? I squared equals -1. So we got to keep going just a little bit further. So we got 12 minus 7i minus 10 times -1. Okay, so this is interesting, right? So -10 times -1 gets us a +10. 12 minus 7i. Okay, so now we do have two pieces we can combine. We can combine our 12 and our 10 because they no longer have i's. So we get 22 minus 7i. As we think through this, we always want to kind of be thinking about going back to our standard form where we put the real piece here, followed by our imaginary piece second.